you all have been able to curate and create this amazing space. And so I'm really excited for what we'll be doing today. I do just want to set the tone with a couple of ground rules. Unless you are one of the panelists or Billy, your camera should be off, as well as if you are not speaking, your mic should be off. And this really just helps, one, with noise, making sure that we're able to hear everyone, but also with the cameras off, it really helps with any video lagging that might happen. And so keeping your cameras off is one of the ways that we really try to avoid that. And so now I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Billy, and he can take it away. You're muted, Billy.
My God. Welcome, everyone, to the Cornerstone Talk podcast. My name is Billy Fillmore. Today, we have a special podcast. The Cornerstone Talk podcast and PBL participants from Change4NYC City, from Children Aid, will be co-hosting this podcast and asking questions to our 5 guest speaker panel. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeanette, and she's going to introduce the 5 topics we are covering today in this discussion.
Hi, my name is Jeanette. The topics being covered in this discussion are homelessness, housing disparities, Black Lives Matter, police brutality, LGBTQIA rights, mental health, addiction, medical racism, disparity. And now I'm gonna pass it on to Tasmia and Leslie.
My name is Tasmia, and
my name is Damia.
And today we're gonna, as Jeanette kindly mentioned, how we're gonna go over these 5 topics. And with the unprecedented time that we are in right now, I think it's very important to have these discussions and to open up conversation. And so we all want to thank you for joining us and for allowing us to listen to your perspective and giving us more knowledge about what you may know. Damia?
Yeah, so now we're going to allow our guest speakers to introduce themselves. We have Ramon Salgado, Nakeisha Vanterpool, Nicole Vanterpool, Professor Darnell, Morehand Olufade, and Shadae Nisbett. If you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, how are you? I'm Ramon. You really pronounce Raymond, but it's okay. I'll be speaking. Yeah, I'm one of the speakers. Nothing really much to say. Anybody else?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, so my name is Nakeisha Vanterpool. I'm a licensed social worker. I work primarily with survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And I am happy to be here.
So right now we'll go over, I want to ask you guys, and this is for everyone, anyone can answer.
Not everyone got a chance to introduce themselves.
Oh, okay.
Oh no.
I'm Professor Darnell Morehand Olufade, and I teach African American history at the University of Bridgeport. I've been teaching there since 2014, 2 of the particular courses, part 1 and part 2. And I'm here today really to listen and learn from those of you who are much younger than I am as to what you feel and wish to discuss about these various topics. Okay? Thank you.
Shadae.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shadae Nisbett. Currently, I am a workforce development instructor at the Dole Fund, and we typically work with the homeless population and mixed in there those who suffer from addiction and mental health. And we assist in the transition between homelessness and being able to go back into the community to have, a home of their own and able to work and help them with finding employment. I think what you guys are doing today is incredible. I'm excited to be a part of it and definitely to see your input on the topics that you guys want to talk about today.
Awesome. All right, so I'll introduce myself now because I've also been asked to be on the panel. So again, my name is Nicole Vanterpool. I currently work as a U.S. immersion manager for a nonprofit organization called Build On, here in New York and in Connecticut. And then I also split my time with Children's Aid as a program consultant and education coordinator. Tasmia, take it away.
Thank you. So I'm glad everyone got the chance to introduce themselves. And so we already went over the topics we're going to discuss, and this question applies for anyone on the panel. And so we want to ask you, why is it important for you to be here to discuss these topics?
If I may. These topics, for example, Black Lives Matter, homelessness, LGBTQ, we're presented with problems in our communities, and very big ones. They impact us more than a lot of people think. And it's good to address these problems and solve them in any means possible. Most likely peacefully, we prefer that. But yeah, it's a good way to spread awareness, because it may not affect you, but it affects a lot of other people. And, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Ramon said, I think it's very important that when you have access to something or have knowledge about something, it's very important that you share it with your community, whatever your community looks like, right? So right now, you guys are my community here on this screen. And so it's important that you share what you know with your community so that we can all grow together and continue to learn and move forward together.
Anyone else want to add on?
Well, it's very important that the young people of today actually hold these particular types of gatherings and to collaborate as much as possible, because you're the ones who are receiving the most recent degrees, the most recent certifications. You are up to date with the most recent publications about these situations. You're on the ground, you're in the field on a constant basis. So those of us who are older than yourselves, who are stuck in our professions that don't allow us to get out and to really talk to you, we're at a loss because of how the situations have developed. And many of us have been disconnected from the communities completely for a very long time.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I know like a lot of what was mentioned, I know many of us can also agree with that as well.
Can I add? I'm sorry. All right, sorry about that. I just wanted to add that it's good that you guys are continuing to have these conversations, especially now. I feel like, especially with social media, it's hot and cold, right? Like sometimes when we talk about a topic, we're on it and we're very heavy and passionate about a topic, and then it just kind of fizzles on, And I feel like today is very important to form meetings like this where we're able to organize our thoughts and how we feel and possible ways that we can come up with solutions and a plan that we can address these issues and not just be for a moment, that it can be ongoing. And it starts with having stuff like this, right? Where you're putting multiple people in a room and just filling each other out, hearing where they're coming from, because we all give a perspective, a view, a point of view, an opinion. And so everyone adds to that. Everyone who's in this room adds to that. And so if we can get any voices to come together and speak about a topic, especially about the ones that you have chosen, I think it's a great opportunity for us to be heard.
Okay, my name is Crystal, and I have the next question. When we think about the ways each of our physical communities look and the ways they've changed through the years, how do you think the government has failed to support those experiencing homelessness and addressing housing security? This question is for Ramon and Nakeisha.
So I think in particular with the populations that I have the privilege of working with and serving, it's really frustrating sometimes to know all of the information out there, all of the programs that are out there, and just the hurdles that folks have to jump through in order to access these programs like shelter, like housing, especially in a place like New York where, you know, they call it the housing shortage or the housing crisis, but realistically, there is no housing shortage in New York. There's plenty of housing. The issue is that there is a disparity in income, and there's not enough affordable housing. And so the message that sends to folks who live below the poverty line, for folks who work day in, day out to support themselves and their families, who just don't make enough money to have 40 times the rent in order to rent one of these apartments. What it says to them, what New York says to them is, we don't want you here. We don't want someone who is poor and most of the time brown here. We don't want you here. And it's very discouraging, and it's very frustrating for the populations that I work with, because they feel that, and they feel dehumanized by a lot of these systems that make you recertify over and over and over and over, who have all of these rules. And if you miss one appointment because your child was sick and you have to take them to urgent care, if you are housing a relative because they need housing, then you can lose it all. And so it's a very, very dehumanizing process for them to have to go through. And so I think that, especially in New York, our government definitely fails them time and time again, especially with the lack of funding for shelters to keep them in a livable condition. And especially when you read about like what the NYPD budget is, and you see all the money that goes to these things that NYPD just does not need. And it could be going into housing. It could be going into sheltering more folks who are street homeless and creating safer environments in shelters and equipping shelter staff to support the folks who are in shelter. It's frustrating.
I'd love to add to what you said. For those of you who do not know, I personally have been in an issue. I was homeless. I've been in the shelter system. And I gotta tell you, there's not enough for the people that they're providing for. They're not doing enough. I was placed in Covenant House on 42nd Street. I'm not sure if anybody was aware of, but I have a personal experience with it. And there's not enough funding. There's not enough resources. And the main reason is because it's not that important to the people that are up and they have those positions in power. They don't address or pay attention to that as much because everything else is involved with business or making money, or all the funds are just being spent on things that are not important to everybody else. Communities need it, especially communities that are that have high poverty rate. But it just depends on the government whether they really want to put the funds towards the things that are needed, which is why it's good to bring attention to this, because once we do get enough voices speaking to the people in power and we have an influence, then the sky's the limit. Then we'll have the power to correct these problems. Again, I was homeless. The shelter system it doesn't work for many. They end up either putting people back in the streets, or the rare percentage have opportunities, but it doesn't come to everybody.
I'm so glad that you brought up the point of how, with homelessness, there's a lot of the wealth gap. And this kind of continues with the next question that, I was going to ask. And this question is directed towards Nicole and Professor Darnell. And I'm asking, do you believe there's any connection between gentrification, homelessness, and housing disparities?
Oh, definitely. Of course, there's a connection. Why is gentrification taking place in mostly Black and brown communities in the first instance in all our major cities across this nation? I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, well, near Phoenix, Arizona for 21 years and watched a particular community. All of a sudden, everything came up that it was being gentrified. But as the gentrification took place, most of the people who had lived in that community for a good number of years, generation after generation, raised their children, went to those schools. Next thing, they were moved out. They couldn't afford to live there anymore. And that is the plan. It's indifference, it's racism, it's financial and political corruption that has taken hold of our situations, of our societies. And to make a community to the point whereby people can no longer afford those rents. And the next thing you know it, you've only got people that are white that are moving into that particular area. I mean, Harlem is a shining example of what is going on. I was not raised in Harlem, or born even in Harlem per se, but I was born in Manhattan, New York, a great number of years ago. I don't remember seeing a situation whereby all of a sudden you had all these white people walking around in Harlem. It was just usually an area for us, our people. And a couple of years ago, about 10 years ago, I should say, I just kept seeing white people getting out of the subways. And so I asked a friend, who are these people? They said, oh, they live here. I said, they live in Harlem? He said, yeah. I said, when? So that's when the gentrification factor came into play in my mind. And that's when I said, okay, this is planned. They're taking back our cities. They're pushing us out.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Darnell. Just to piggyback off of that, I 100% agree and definitely do believe that there is a connection between gentrification, homelessness, and housing disparities. Just like you said, why is it happening in primarily Black and brown communities? When we think of people moving in, right, and property values going up, rent going up, that means people are having to leave their homes. People are having to leave behind everything they know in order to find somewhere to be able to afford to live. When we think about our minimum wage, albeit they've raised it to $15 and it's so great, it's still not enough. It's not enough for people to be able to pay their rent. Still, it's not enough for people to be able to put food on their tables. There's no reason why people should have to have 2 and 3 and 4 jobs in order to support themselves. And what ends up happening is if I live in a house that was, once before my rent was $900, and I was able to afford that barely, and now my neighborhood is changing. That means that my landlord is going to increase my rent. So now my rent is $1,200 a month. And before, when it was $900, I was barely making it each month to be able to pay my rent. Now at $1,200, that's a significant increase. And now I need to go out and find either another place to live in my city, in wherever I'm residing at, or move to a completely different state that's a little bit more affordable. And if I don't have that, let's say I lose my job, now I'm homeless. I have nowhere to stay, right? I can't afford it. Or I'm moving into somewhere that isn't necessarily the best place to live, right? It's not necessarily a safe neighborhood or whatever the case may be. And so I definitely think that there is a direct correlation to gentrification. And I don't know, like what do we do about it? How do we address it? Because what ends up happening is entire cultures get wiped out, right? We think about New Orleans after Katrina, right? And the very large influx of people who were developing properties, and now there are all these what are they called, like Airbnbs and house rentals, right? And the community doesn't necessarily look how it used to look 15 years ago, right? And so when what's left of that community is trying to hold on to its culture and hold on to its values and everything, the new people are now calling the police, making complaints, right? All these things. And it's like, well, you moved here and you're contributing nothing to this community, and yet you still want to take from it. And so that's kind of where we're left, right? We are being pushed out of our communities. Our culture is being pushed out of our communities. And it's going to come to a point where we're not going to have anywhere else to go, right? Do we move to Mars? Do we move to another country?
Yeah, I want to make a point also, because I think it's important that we also acknowledge this on a global scale, and what this looks like, because I think globally, we're citizens of the world, right? Globally, you know, Black and brown people are suffering from these exact same things, right? So this is not just exclusive to New York, right? When you look at places like the Bahamas, right? Bahamas is beautiful. People love going to the Bahamas, but their minimum wage is $5.25. But their cost of living far surpasses that, right? So where in order to comfortably live in the Bahamas, their minimum wage would have to be upwards towards $15, $20. But it's $5.25. And the reason for that is because white developers, they go in, and not even white developers, sometimes developers, they go in, they, you know, say like, look, we've got this penthouse, this waterfront beach house, blah, 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 this Airbnb, come bring your friends. And similar to what you said, Nicole, they take from these communities, and then things start to shift. The culture looks differently, right? And what ends up happening is this continued displacement of Black and brown people, right? So it's like the transatlantic slave trade happened, you know, centuries ago, but we continue to see these very, very large displacements of Black and brown people, right? And so it's just like, where's the end?
The end comes with you younger people. The end comes with you younger people, because you're the ones who are going to demand. You are the ones who are not going to just sit down and listen to people give you the okie doke.
Yes,
you understand what I'm saying? That end comes with you guys, because you have now the financial knowledge. A number of you will gain that financial knowledge. A number of you within your positions professionally will tell those who are supposedly in power, we're not taking it anymore. And then of course it's through the vote.
that's right.
You run your political factors within your communities to tighten up your cultural and financial and political factors. That's where the end comes. Okay?
And if I may add, before we move on, another outcome of us working and us not being able to afford the rent with one job is getting another one. But you don't see that in white communities. You don't see that in other areas other than the projects, or, you know, other areas where it's heavily populated with colored people. So yeah, that's another outcome, and I've experienced it myself. It's backbreaking. Nobody wants to suffer that.
Thank you guys for such beautiful responses. That was like absolutely amazing. But now I'm gonna take it on to the next question, which is, what do you think will happen to our community if they successfully defund the police? And this is for all guests to answer.
I'm going to be honest with you. Defunding the police, I'm still trying to figure that out. because there could be so many factors involved with all of a sudden we're withdrawing money for police to run their departments, because the police are not there, it's true, to just shoot and kill us. The police are really there for other factors, and there are policemen who do handle the other factors and do it very well. I'm afraid if you defund it completely, chaos will break out. Okay? And this is something that, again, we have to pay very close attention, because if we have chaos, then it falls right into their laps. Aha! So now we really have a reason to incarcerate more of these Black men who are really the main targets, and now also our Black women who are also targets. You understand what I mean? Historically speaking, it may seem like we can't make a move in any direction. No, we can. Yes, we can, because I say the police have to perhaps change its policies and mostly their procedures. And if they're not prepared to do that, then the funding should be decreasing for them. Right. Understand what I'm saying? We got to hold something accountable in some kind of way, but wrap it the way you want it to go.
Right.
So I wanna add that I am a supporter of defunding the police, but not defunding in a way where we get rid of police fully. I think defunding in a way where the amount of money, when we think about the NYPD, right, and the amount of money and support that they receive yearly, is far beyond the amount of money and support that resources like, you know, social workers, like substance abuse counselors, like school counselors, right? That money, the money the NYPD far surpasses the amount of money and support that those resources receive yearly. And so I'm a big proponent for defunding the police in a way that police will do police work and not do the work of a mental health counselor, will not do the work of a violence interrupter, will not do the work of a social worker, will not do the work of, you know, of people who are far more equipped to do the jobs that we are asking police to do. And because we're asking police to do these jobs that they are not equipped for, we are now having, or we've had, a very large influx of police responding in ways that we don't need them to be responding, but we can't ask them to respond in the ways that we need them to respond because they're not trained for it. They're not equipped to handle these things. And so I'm a very big believer in shifting the money that police precincts, whoever, that the police get, shifting it to resources that our communities need.
Yeah. So I'm in a little bit of a unique position. And I have to say that between Professor Darnell and between my sister, I'm somewhere in the middle, right? So I'm a licensed social worker and I work within a criminal justice agency, right? I work at a prosecutor's office. And so I see firsthand, right? If we don't have police, right, then, you know, I see what happens when I'm working with victims and providing therapy. And so, no, we cannot do completely without the police because they serve a purpose. But I do believe, similar to what Nicole said, as far as defunding them and limiting their budgets, right? I think that that's necessary. However, this idea that we should defund the police and shift the money into more social service agencies, like more social workers, more violence interrupters, more social service agencies. I think we are forgetting to do the work of looking and addressing at how these same organizations, like the National Association of Social Workers, has also done the work to uphold patriarchy and white supremacy, right? And the damages that they've done in the same communities that police has done. And so I don't think that's necessarily the answer to say we need more social workers, right? Because social work as a profession has been inherently racist.
Yes.
Right?
In this society.
And so, right. And so I think that, yes, we want more compassion. We want more reconciliation. We want more addressing the things that have gone unaddressed. We want more conversations like these where people are being held accountable and being called in so that we can start to do the work to dismantle these things bit by bit, right? Social work is not always going to be the answer, right? Everyone isn't working from an anti-racist framework, right? Everyone isn't, even within my own agency, right? We talk about it all day. And so I think that there are a lot of moving parts. And so, but I do agree that as far as specifically the NYPD budget and other law enforcement agencies like them, like LAPD, like Cook County in Chicago, I do think that they are receiving incredible amounts of money with almost nothing to show for it, right? So where's the checks and balances?
Mhm.
And if I may add, these police departments, these organizations, they receive this money, but again, nothing to show for it, right? These policemen, they get paid their salaries, they get paid for whatever they're training for, and the rest of the money that's used for supplies or necessities for these cops or these people to be equipped to do their jobs, again, nothing to show for it, but at the same time, the rest of the money, it gets sent to these people in power. We don't know where this money goes when we have so much money left over that we can put into these communities. Like, come on, millions. Think about it. Things can change if we just understand where this money is going to, and if it's not being used for a specific purpose, why hold on to it?
I think it's sad because police are supposed to serve the community. That's the purpose, to be a deterrent and to serve the community. And it's not happening, right? We are constantly seeing them coming into our communities and escalating crisis. Like, you're supposed to de-escalate and you're not doing that. And so initially your response is, fine, defund the police, because they're not doing what they said they were going to do, right? Especially since we're living in these communities where there's high crime, right? There's high mental health issues, right? And so as a police officer, you should be well prepared to handle it all. And I don't think killing should be the first way to go. And I feel like if we're going to defund, then we really need to touch the education part, the training part, right? Where's the crisis intervention? Where's that at? I haven't seen it yet, right? And so it's sad because we're supposed to have this connection to NYPD. And as you know, as we progress and as racism is more prevalent, it's very visual, right? We're seeing everything now. I don't know where that connection, that based relationship is.
We're seeing the symptoms.
It's deteriorating. And so,
if I may add, okay, policemen, they get training. I'm sure one of the things that they mention is to not break down under pressure. Always know the next step to take in a specific situation. But these policemen, they obviously don't show that. Let's take it, for example, the recent shootings. These cops, it's not necessary for them to proceed with these actions. They're not going forth with the training that they're provided. They're breaking down under pressure and making decisions that affect not only themselves as individuals, but they impact the police as well. So in order to hold a good image, why not retrain them on how to thoroughly involve themselves? Exactly. So what's the problem now? Why is not anything working?
It's always important to recognize that when you're looking at something, right? Recognizing when you are looking at the symptoms of a disease, right? So the police that we have now are not the disease in themselves. They are the symptoms of something larger, right? Something that was created long before them. And so you have to look at the root of something, right? It's birth, it's creation, right? When you look at a child and see this child might have bad behavior, right? We don't blame the child, we look at the parents, right? And it's very similar in that way. We have to look at the creation of a thing and see what was it birthed out of, right? Police were birthed out of slave catching, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's inherent racism that
Exactly.
has definitely messed up the society to such an extent. And like you said, it's a case of during the time of slavery, you had your overseers on the plantations that were brutally treating blacks who are enslaved in a terrible way. And then even when they were allowed to leave the plantation under specific, carrying specific passes, you had the patrollers, the slave patrollers out there who were supposed to be like a form of the police, stopping and killing and murdering the slaves. It got to such an extent at one time in history, especially in the southern states, that the owners of slaves had to take in the patrollers into court to stop them from killing their black people that they owned, because they were saying, you are destroying who we owe. I mean, who we actually use as property to sell into whatever. You're destroying our particular individual plantation type of situation. So yeah, this is a continuation of that whole system into the police department.
And if you don't get in at the root and pick it apart bit by bit, the symptoms only worsen. So no matter what interventions you implement, the symptoms, they're just come new symptoms, right?
Absolutely.
100%.
Okay, I'm next. What are the similarities and differences of the civil rights movement in the 60s versus the 70s movement we see happening now? That's for Professor Darnell and Shadae.
Okay. In the 1960s, we had specific black leaders that were highly visible in the civil rights movement. And all of you know who those black leaders were. Besides Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., there were several others. And they had a purpose for what they were doing. And the major purpose was to get rid of the Jim Crow segregationist laws that had existed since 1872, which were going straight along into the 1960s. They were fighting specifically for not only their civil rights, but their right to vote, okay? Because black men had the right to vote through the 15th Amendment, all right? So they pushed along. They wanted facilities to be open, meaning in transportation, in any type of accommodation, the whole works. This is what was on the table. But like I said, those were those specific leaders who led groups of people throughout the nation, and mostly into boycotts and whatnot in the South to achieve. In other words, they had to let whites know straight up, we will break you financially if you're not prepared to come to the table and sit down and talk to us.
That's right. And
make the changes that are necessary, okay? They were that smart. They utilized young people in SNCC, CORE, and all of those particular organizations. That's all a part of the civil rights movement. What we are looking at today is extremely different in many ways, because we have the same issues of civil rights, if you get what I'm saying, but yet there's the complication of the fact that most of us are able to go into accommodations and stuff like that we can afford. We do face racism at times, of course, because we can afford them. But the fact of the matter is that we have no specific black leaders anymore. Not on the level of how these black men took us to the point where we're going to fight and we're going to protest if we have to die to get what we want. Our protest movement at this point in time is fascinating because it has a lot of whites who literally decided young white people, I'm not talking about the older ones, I'm talking about the younger ones who decided, wait a minute, we never knew all of this was going on. Yeah, we don't understand this racism. We're not going to tolerate it. If we are going to join anybody, we're going to join our own Black brothers and sisters to make the change. Okay? That's what you have to keep harnessing. You have to move with that. Do not stop that. Because a lot of those white children, they're the ones who are the children of the judges. They're the ones who are the children of the politicians, who are turning against their parents who are in my age bracket and telling them you lied. You told us this was a colorblind society. It is not. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to be out there and protest. So that is where you come into play. And if I don't care if it takes you the next 30 to 40 years, trust me, the movement that you are dealing with now is the catalyst, the main catalyst for the change.
And the results are necessary.
That's right.
And definitely want to add that seeing how they did things back in the 60s, they moved in solidarity. They moved in hurdles. Right? It was consistent.
Yeah.
Right? They were fighting something in mass quantities consistently for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right? And then I look at how we are today, right? And let's just jump to when, everything happened with Floyd, and we were just Black Lives Matter, and it was huge, right? It was all over the news. It was big. And yes, we were moving in large quantities. However, as we know how social media works today, if it's not hot, we move on, right? And so people are still protesting, but do you see it? Right?
No, but that's your media. You see, they're trying to make it look like you guys have no cohesiveness.
Right.
They're trying to make it look like you will never be able to have that power as individuals to collaborate, to actually form a setting. You understand what I mean?
Right.
And this is where you're using the media now. Just what we're doing today. You're going to be doing this across the country, all over the world, because they protested even in Europe, the UK, the works. It's like that little girl, Thunberg, whatever her name, with the climate change. That's how you're going to do it. Okay? She rocked them when she went into the United Nations to speak. You are going to do the same thing. You're going to rock them straight through your votes. And when you go into these various different political places, the Capitol buildings of your states, whatever, that's how you are going to do it. We didn't have social media in the 60s.
Right.
If I may add, I know that the question wasn't directed towards me, but the other day I had witnessed a protest, and it was for ACS, and it was right like 2-3 blocks away from Yankee Stadium. But what I saw was that there were more cops than necessary, more police. You saw a crowd about a block that spanned a block, one block, and you saw about 5-6 patrol cars in the front and behind the crowd, and it diminishes the influence. In a way, other people, they see this block amount of people that could just only fill like the radius of one block, and you have so many cops. It makes people that witness these protests feel like, okay, these guys are idiots. They're like, it's not enough people, and then they put more police than the population of influencers, and it diminishes the influence. It doesn't spread the message how we want.
Before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to share something. So in the 60s, I call them my elders because they're my elders.
That's what they are.
honestly. They march for the same thing that we're marching. So back then, they marched for the right to vote and the right to be equal. Um, in 1865, June 19th, we were free from slavery. So after 1865, we had the right to vote. And 50, 60 years later, we were still fighting for the right to vote because they didn't want us to vote. When we use our right to vote, we're powerful. As you can see, the Democrats, they want the minority votes because without our vote, um, they would possibly lose. And I just want to say also, it's a shame that we're still protesting 60 years later. Now we're protesting police brutality that they was protesting back then. We're protesting, we want everybody to use their right to vote. And I feel like we're the next generation that needs to end it off. Yeah, we should not put on this weight on our shoulder and pass it on to the next generation. It needs to end here. We need to enforce change and we need to advocate for change. And it ends with us, and that's it. So next, we're gonna pass it on to Ashley. The next question.
Hi, after Billy's words, very inspirational. I totally agree. So my next question
It was
is
actually
for all
question
guests.
6.
So my next question is for all.
7.
Oh, what? It
Yeah,
was
I'm
6.
on 7.
Oh, all right. I guess not.
So my question is for all guests. So our identities are very intersectional, meaning we identify as more than just our race or gender, etc. Think of identities that make up who you are, and which are the ones that you think about the most, and why. So which do you identify with, and why?
I'll go. So I am Nakeisha Vanterpool. I am a Black, queer, social worker. I am the sister of Nicole Vanterpool, Alcedos Vanterpool, Rachel Wright. I'm the daughter of Leslie Bivillari Vanterpool. I am the daughter of Leslie Vanterpool. And all of those identities are important to me because it shows me how dynamic I am and how dynamic the lineage before me is. And it reminds me each and every day that I am here as a result of a lot of sacrifice, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of love. And so those identities are important to me for that reason.
Yes.
Wow, that's excellent. I have several identities that I actually deal with on a daily basis. I am an African American by birth. I have the African American heritage through my father, late father, Carlton Kent Morehand.
Excuse me? Hello?
Yes.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm not home and my phone is about to die.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
I have Caribbean heritage from the West Indies on my mother's side. She was first generation American. And on top of that, I turned around and married my late husband, who was from Nigeria, West Africa. Yeah, so I walk around with a lot of identification. And I was educated in high school in Jamaica, West Indies many years ago. Lived in England for 6 years and started my university education there. Actually lived in Nigeria, West Africa for 12 years. So I identify with the Black diaspora very, very easily. And some people find it a little bit disturbing when they really find out who I am, because it's like, oh gosh, you're just not in one point or place. I think it's great that I can understand where people are coming from when they all decide to go in various different vents and rages. And I just sit there quietly and listen and say, okay, maybe this is how we can deal with this, or maybe this is how we can deal with that. Because I was forced as a person, as a younger person, to deal with a grandmother from the Caribbean who was from the Dutch West Indies, to go to Africa, and all of a sudden I'm listening to totally different languages that I was not raised in, and having to fit into cultures that I could never have imagined, okay? So we have to learn, as Keisha says, to walk constantly and be proud of who we are. And don't let anybody take that from you.
100% agree.
If I may.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. My name is Ramon Luis Salgado. I'm strictly my background is Spanish. I am three different nationalities: Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Cuban. Uh, my grandmother from my mother's side is from the Dominican Republic. My grandfather from my mother's side is from Cuba, and my father's side is from Puerto Rico. Um, I know they may not be of Black background or African American background, but we do face the same problems. We are brought up by our the ones that come before us. Not only do they teach us things from their experiences, but their problems are also handed down to us as well. In ways, it is similar to the Black community. You see a lot of things going on that are very similar. They go hand to hand, and the experience that you go through shape you, but at the same time, it's brought from the past of your ancestors. We can speak about people that come from a white descent, from white privilege. They have different perspectives on our communities because of what their ancestors have been through. And like this whole thing, I'm proud to be a part of because I've faced racism towards Hispanics my whole life. And it goes hand to hand in African American communities as well. We face the same problems, but a lot of us segregate different cultures, and they don't include. I'm sorry, they don't. They don't say that the issues are the same when really they are. And we could have a lot more people fighting for the same causes, but that is also a big issue um, that needs to be taken care of. We all stand as one people. Our cultures don't divide us.
Thank you. So I'll go next. My name is Nicole Shannon Vanterpool, and I identify as a Black cisgendered woman who is resilient, who is educated, and who is very hood. I grew up in the Bronx, born and raised, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud that I know or can be in many different rooms and be able to, be able to hold a presence in many different spaces. But I also recognize and move through this world because there are people who came before me who allowed that space to exist, who through their blood, sweat, tears, and their work have poured into me, who have poured into my siblings, poured into my family, and I'm grateful for that. And I never take that for granted. And that plays a very large part of my identity, is moving through this world, taking up space everywhere I go. Why? Because I damn well earned it. And there are people who fought for it, and so I am going to take it. And I pride myself in that. And my number one message to everyone that I come in contact with is that you take up that space too. Everywhere you go, you leave a scorch mark on this planet. Every single place and life that you touch, you make sure you leave a mark, a good one. right? One that doesn't cause harm to other people, but you leave a mark because you earned it. There are people who fought for you to be here, and you act like it. And that's how I move through this world, and that's how I celebrate who I am, and that's how I hold true to myself and to my identity.
So now we're gonna take
Shadae
questions.
didn't go.
No, I was about to clear my throat and everything. I was my name is Shadae Nisbett. I am an African American gay female. I am an educator. I am an advocate for my community and for those who look like me. It's something that I definitely am proud of. I show it in the career that I do and the work that I do. I love to serve, especially if it's going to uplift those who are around me. And it's something that I'm probably going to continue doing regardless of where I'm at. It's something about giving to others, especially if it's those that look like me, that just makes me feel great, right? And so I challenge you guys that even if what you're doing isn't the most financially rewarding, to really push yourself to do what you love to do. And that's, and if that means serving your community, right? Going back to your roots, right? Because I'm from Brownsville myself, right? And I love it because it made me who I am. You know, I go back there and I still feel the community that I was born in, you know, and that's something that we don't really see today, a strong community anymore. And so if you guys can do that in what you're doing, bringing people together and fighting for something, regardless of the financial gain, then continue to do that because it will help shape you too.
Brooklyn. So now we're kind of closing out. So we have one question from the audience. She's going to ask the question to the 5 panel guests. So Jeanette, you could go now. If you're here.
I don't know. She's the one that died.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Number 9, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Why is mental health important in the minority community? And how does living in low-income neighborhoods affect minority mental health? Okay. Mental health. Yeah. Should I ask it again?
Yeah.
No, we
you kind of cut off a little bit. It cut off a little bit.
Why is mental health important in the minority community, and how does living in low-income neighborhoods affect minorities' mental health? This question is for Nakeisha and Shadae.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Shadae.
I feel like in our communities, mental health isn't really transmitted across generational lines. And I say it like that because today, when we talk about mental health and therapy, you know, it's something that we're very familiar with. It was talked about. It's something that we practice, right? But I say it like that because I remember when I lost my mother and I told my uncle that I was going to therapy, and he looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. Like, why are you going to therapy? What's wrong? Are you okay? Like, it seemed absolutely absurd to him. And it made me just realize that that's something he's just not comfortable with doing. It wasn't a source for him as it was for me. And so for me, the idea of mental health and finding resources to help that is comfortable for me, and is not necessarily something that was talked about or practiced when he was younger. I also should say that as people of color, we go through a lot. You know, we witness a lot. You know, our people are heavily populated in heavily violent communities, right? We make up majority of the criminal justice system, right? We go through a lot, and it really affects us mentally. And the fact that those resources are not available to us on a daily basis and easily accessible is something that I seriously just don't get. I feel like because we go through so much trauma on a regular basis, and now we're seeing it on social media, and you know, it's clearly hitting us in a way where we're upset and, taking us back to past trauma. And it's something that we're constantly going through. And so mental health is something that's very prevalent. It's something that unless we can find the resources and pay for those resources, we won't get, right? And which
it should be a part of the reparations package.
Right, like unless you have the money, the insurance, right, to go out there and get the mental health treatment for you, it's not available to you. And I feel like, how is it possible for me to go through what I've been through and I don't have the resource?
Right.
So it's definitely something that's very prevalent in our communities, that the resources need to be there, and I shouldn't have to spend hundreds of dollars to get it.
Right. Especially because, there's always been this idea that only rich people go to therapy because they have the time to sit around and talk about their feelings. But I think that there is a level of generational trauma that exists within the DNA of Black and brown people that needs to be addressed. And I think that therapy for Black people and communities of color is important because therapy helps you to normalize or not unnormalize certain things that have become normalized, right? So the system, right, we'll call it the system, has normalized seeing things like violence, normalized poverty, normalized violence, right? Therapy works to show you that these things are not normal, right? These things are tools of racism. They're tools of supremacy that were created. And having access to mental health resources shows you these things are not normal. Poverty is not necessary within a society. Homelessness is not necessary within a society. Violence is not necessary within a society. None of these things are necessary, but they've become normalized, right, in order to keep the status quo. And so if more people had access to mental health resources, it would disrupt that, which is why therapy is not free. I do it for free, but which is why therapy is not free. And so I think it's important for those reasons that communities of color and Black communities have access to those things. I think that there are a lot of reasons why our communities decide not to seek mental health help, because we also have to look at the way in which, again, these systems have also been inherently racist, right? We have to look at the way in which the DSM, was created, and it leaves out a lot of things that are specific to Black and brown people, or diagnoses disproportionately Black and brown people. And so there's that mistrust there. We also have to look at the income gap, we also have to look at, there are a lot of factors. Church, right? You ever say, like, Mom, I'm sad, and she says, pray about it? That's very commonplace. And so seeking mental health support has been heavily stigmatized. And so I think as young people who are seeing all of these things around you and are hip to the lingo, like trigger, like certain mental health diagnoses, I think that you all have this unique opportunity to tap into things that your parents didn't tap into, that your grandparents didn't tap into. You have access to these resources that are free, right? You know where they are, you know how to locate them. And so now you, as Generation X, Y, Z, millennial, whatever, you're going to do that work, that core inner work, so that the generation following will not have to work to undo generational trauma because you've already done it.
Yes. So I just want to talk about two things regarding mental health before we get into like the last closing question. I see Marilyn Petrado, she asked something about conversation. What can we do to like broaden the conversation about mental health? As a younger generation, where we use social media a lot, So I feel like we should use our social media platform to like share awareness. You see how like Taraji P. Henson, she's big on mental health, and she uses her huge platform to share about mental health and to bring awareness. Me personally, one of my podcasts is we held a mental health edition awareness, and the topic was why is mental health important in the minority community. And yeah, that was a good one. So yeah, so
Can I add to that, Billy? I think in the same ways, right? Like Nakeisha said, like we've normalized so many things, and I think Marilyn, one of your like your question is really great. Is like how do we make this not such a taboo topic, right? And I think normalizing it, right? In the same ways that on social media and in our world, violence has been normalized, right? Fighting has been normalized. Seeing Black and brown bodies being murdered, you know, on social media has been normalized. We can do the opposite, right? We can pick up our phones and talk about mental health in the same ways that we see all of these negative things being normalized. We can normalize the conversation around mental health, right? Even if your families are like, you know, I don't really want to talk about that, you keep talking about it. You keep bringing up the conversation, right? You keep pushing. You talk to your friends about it. Having conversations like this one and speaking in forums or listening to people around you discuss these topics is how we change it and how we break the stigma around things like mental health. And I think that's what's most important, is that we continue to talk, to speak, and through our actions, right? I think therapy is a very important thing, and I think therapy provides us with the tools that we need to live everyday life, right? And so when I'm with my friends, I be hyped, like I'm on my way to therapy, like yay, or like take a video, you know, post a Instagram story, like on my way to therapy, or you know, going to talk to a friend, or having I have an accountability buddy, right? Someone that I check in with every single week, right? And say, hey, here's how I've been feeling. Here's what's going on. Here's what, and they help me. So it may not even be going to therapy, but having people who you check in with, right? Who check up on you, who support you. Those are ways that we begin to break these cycles, and ways that we begin to normalize expressing our feelings and naming, right, these things that we are experiencing. I think these are ways that we begin to break those and begin to end the generational trauma that we've all been living through, and we begin to break that, because for the generations to come, we'll be able to equip them with this language that we didn't have, right? We'll be able to equip them with the tools and skills that we didn't have, and we're learning now well into adulthood, right? They'll be having that from a very young age because we did the work in order for them to have that, and to grow up in having the language and the tools that they need in order to address their mental health and in order to express themselves in healthy ways.
And working on your mental health is not only for when things aren't going well, it's also for when things are going right? I love when my clients share things that are going great and have wins, right? Because each win in your life, no matter how big or how small, deserves an audience and deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah.
If I may add, Nicole, you had said something earlier. I'd like to build on that. It has to do with like spreading the word about you know how basically about perception. For example, my grandmother, born and raised in DR, Dominican Republic. Over there, racism is still, it's heavy. It's drilled into people's minds unconsciously. And an example of that is how people of color are seen as low status. It's not communicated. Back then, Haitians and Dominican, the islands are connected. So now, from our perspective, sending a message and relaying that, hopefully globally, um, it would help if you hear other people from other places in the world fighting these um, these problems as well. It'll influence us as one of the main, as the United States, as one of the main influencers in this world, to be like, yo, we should address these problems as well. And I think the fact of the matter is that we're doing this to change others' perception and have them accept the fact that the world is not perfect. The system has corrupted us, and
Now we're gonna break it.
that you need change. We can't continue like this. We can't.
So before we get into the last close question, I just wanted to share. So this semester, me and a friend, her name is Corinne, we're kind of like co-partnering. So we want to focus on college student mental health. So we're starting a club called UB Student Mental Health Association. As y'all know, minorities, we go to college because we want to live a better life. Um, yeah, so we basically we go to college because we want to sometimes be to get our degree and go into fields like doctors, lawyers, or go into fields as a teacher to educate. Um, when we come from some of us come from minority communities, we face PTSD. We live in communities where some have witnessed gun violence. We witness communities where we witness poverty. And we just wanted to create a safe space for students on campus to share about mental health. And we'll also be starting to raise money for mental health, students' mental health, and just mental health in minority community and minorities community in general. So I got the last closing question. So our question to the panelists is: how can we support the LGBTQIA plus communities and other marginalized communities moving forward?
What does that sound?
So I think one of the ways in which that we support the LGBTQ plus community and other marginalized communities is in the same ways that Black and brown people are asking white people to show up, right? In the same ways that Black and brown people are saying, white people, we need you to see what our community is going through, and we need you to help us in addressing it. Use your power, use your bodies, use whatever to help us, is the same ways that we need to be showing up for other marginalized communities, and opening our eyes and seeing what's happening in those communities, right? The simple fact that the average lifespan of a trans woman is 35 years old, right? That's something that many people don't know or are unaware of, right? The fact that the majority of homeless youth in New York City are LGBTQ youth, right? These are things that we need to begin becoming knowledgeable about, and begin addressing in the exact same ways that we are asking non-people of color or non-Black and brown people to show up for us. We need to be showing up for those communities in the same ways.
Right, and I think it's also as people with certain privileges, I think it's also important to make sure that when you're given a seat at the table that you make room for somebody else. And I think the other side to that is that we touched on intersectionality very briefly, but it's so important to keep the term intersectionality at the forefront of your mind and recognize that these struggles are not exclusive of one another, right? They're all the same. They're where we are all encompassing of many different identities. And these struggles are one and the same. We also have to recognize, similar to what Nicole said, in the same way that we ask non-people of color to show up for the fight to end racism, we need to show up for our trans, queer, other LGBTQ identified folks in that same way. And pay them, give them their flowers, okay? Let's recognize that, you know, in the struggle to end racism, a lot of our leaders identified as LGBTQ, okay? It's also that, you know, we owe a lot to the queer community when it comes to fighting civil rights. right? We owe a lot to them, and seeing their struggle, seeing that struggle and recognizing it as our own, because it is, I think is so important. And remembering to advocate for the rights of every single marginalized person. I think it is the worst idea when we think of oppressed people oppressing people, right? And but it happens far too often. If one of us gets free, but we don't do the work of freeing everyone else, then we're not free. We're not free. What we are is just another tool for oppression and supremacy.
You have to have a very inclusive setting. You like Nakeisha said, you can't have it in such a way that, oh, we're not going to deal with this particular group of people because they don't really fit in with our agenda, or they're not like me. No, we're all human beings. This is something that has to be laid out on the table straight up. We're all human beings. We all are fighting for the rights as human beings to live, not just to survive, but to live in our society appropriately, without all of these other extraneous factors that are set up by folks who have very racist agendas. Okay, they go beyond all of a sudden your color of your skin now as to what you declare yourself as, this, that, or the other. That should not be the problem. That should not be the matter. And support, constant support to our community, LGBTQ community is the most important factor. What we do have a problem with are our Black churches and how they don't give the support. In other words, how do we approach the pastors? You understand what I mean? The reverends who are like supposedly, you know, welcoming to everybody. And then all of a sudden you find out, wait a minute, he's doing everything completely, or she's doing everything completely the opposite of what they're preaching religiously. You understand what I mean? Don't teach me anything about Christ. Don't teach me anything about Muhammad when we know the people existed like this even at their time, okay? 560 AD, whatever. You know, we have to have something. And again, it's you young people who, through your church organizations and whatnot, you just look at the leaders and say, hello, guess what? We're holding a session right here in our church hall, and this is how we're going to deal with it. Finish. That breaks the ice. That makes people start to think, what am I really doing? I'm not kidding. I mean, I see Nicole was just cracking up to the point of no return, but this is how it hits me because every time.
It's true, right? That we live.
It is very true.
Live in this world that constantly, you know, says like, this is the right way to live, this is the wrong way to live, without even giving thought to the fact that for centuries, since the beginning of time, people who are transgender, people who are intersex, people who are two-spirited people have been living in our society for centuries, for ages, for a millennia. They have existed and they have been honored across cultures. And I don't understand how it's possible that in this world that we live in, there are people who are literally like, you have no right to be who you are. It's not your right. It's not your purpose. Your ancestors, the people who fought for us to be here, right, have it's mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling that we have we give ourselves put ourselves on such a pedestal to think that we have a right to tell people how they should be living, right? And a right to tell people that you don't have a space here. How dare we? How dare we even think that? How dare we that even in the Black and brown community think that, yes, we're fighting for our rights, but you, because of who you choose to be, have no space in that movement. How dare we? How dare we?
We pay our own bills. We don't, we focus on our own lives. Like,
it's right. It really starts. It really starts with yourself, with doing the work on yourself, right? And recognizing that the existence of somebody else does not invalidate your own.
That's right.
It does not invalidate your own.
That's right. And this has to be taught. This has to be taught, if you understand what I mean. And those of you, of course, who are in the profession of social work and dealing with people who are coming to you with these type of problems, this is what we have to show them, that support in that manner. No, you are very much worthy. You are very much worthy to be here, because it's God that put you here. Not all these others.
Yes, your existence is sacred. It's sacred.
So you have to come to that term, and this is what disturbs me, because I grew up with factors of, oh, you can't really deal with that person because of such and such and such, or and I'm just standing there or sitting there looking at the person like, who the hell are you to tell me who I shouldn't be talking to based on something like that? That's nonsense. Because again, it's like you're telling me I should not be talking to somebody in my own complexion or whatever. You understand what I mean? Or within another culture or within another nationality. Don't do that. Don't do that. And that's why I said we give support to that community in so many ways to make them realize you are worthy to be on this earth.
Yes.
And to live.
Yes. So we have, this will be our last question, because y'all, we are officially 27 minutes over time. And this has been really great. I'm really am very happy that we have this space and that we are here doing this. So the last question I'll ask to close us out is from Fatumata. And her question is, or she says that, I do agree that we are all fighting for one another to rise up, but with the global issue of anti-Blackness, how do you think that we can reconcile the fact, that fact with non-Black people of color, and the fact that some, not all, are just being performative in their activism?
You call it in. You call it in. When I think, we always see performative activism. We always see things like that. And I think it's important that whether it's your friends, whether it's somebody's profile on Instagram that you just came across, I think it's so important that we continue to hold each other and the person next to me, the person in front of me, the person behind me, we hold them accountable. We call them in, right? If I see that you've done something that misrepresents a movement, that misrepresents something that is performative, that is being done in a way that is harmful to somebody, you call it in. You call them in. This way you can begin the process of unlearning and relearning. That's the only way that happens. That's the only way that happens.
It's very true.
Absolutely.
We also have to learn, and I try to teach this to my students since I teach African American history. Mentally, we cannot remain victims. Mentally, we cannot remain victims, okay? In other words, as much as, especially in my mother's generation and before her, you're Black, you are a victim, period. So in spite of all that's happening that's good, as Nakeisha says, psychologically for you, or even other ways for you in your life, because of who you are a victim. And that is something that I hope and pray that we can erase in that mentality, in that feeling. I don't worry about what white people think about me or you as Black. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't reach to doing what you're doing if you sat down every single day and was trying to figure out, what are my white fellow students thinking about me as a Black person in the class? I don't care.
Nikki Giovanni actually said something very similar recently, because she was asked the question of what do we think about beauty standards and the European beauty standards that get imposed on specifically Black women. And she was like, well, why the hell do we care about what white people think? She said, first of all, we're looking to the road. She's like, they don't look like us. Why are we looking to them in the first place? And that each and every time someone says something like that, you know, especially what you just said, it resonates so much with me because you're right. You're right. Why do we continue to look outside of ourselves for the validation that we're wanting? All we need has always been within our community.
That's right.
Everything that we've ever needed.
Right. Right. And it's always been within us. You understand what I mean? That feeling has always been within us. And some children are trained in that way in their Black homes.
Yes.
I mean, West Indians are extremly great at that because they'll tell you straight up, I don't give a dang about whoever the hell it is going on outside.
Right.
I am only interested in you and how you perform and how you progress. And that is the way our Black people need to continue. The Africans have it innate. You understand me? And that's because their experience and their story is very different. Okay? They've gone through racism on their own soil, but because of their cultures, their languages, as far as they were concerned, this white man who came to colonize us, he couldn't be here forever. We knew that. And we also know we're smarter than him. You get what I mean? So that inner factor, that inner pride, but I mean, I want our children to grow up with this. I really do, because I don't want them to be comparing themselves with white people forever in their lives.
Yes. Each of you are enough.
Hello?
More than enough.
Yeah, that's it.
I just want to say that we are kings and queens, and that's it.
We are. We are.
Long before they ever told us we were.
Honestly.
Right.
We are beautiful, we are strong, we are courageous, we're all.
That's right.
So, Demir, you could go now. We're gonna start to close it out.
Okay, so first I want to say a thank you to the PBL staff for making this podcast happen and for all the hard work you guys put into this. I also want to say a big thank you to all the guests for taking the time to speak to us and to give us such beautiful responses. That was truly enlightening for me, and I'm sure everybody else here. I hope this podcast helped everyone here get a deeper look into the inequalities of the world, and I hope that it inspired you as much as it inspired me to go out and to make some changes in our current society. Thank you guys so much again, because honestly, I learned so much today. I'm sure everybody else did. Y'all really made me want to get up and go find justice and just go grab it. Hold it. So yeah, thank you guys so much. That was really beautiful. And I was like over here shedding tears behind the camera. Like, it was really good. So I'll now pass the mic to Billy so that he can finish closing us out.
So as the Cornerstone Talk podcast come to an end, I also want to thank the PBL staff, the PBL participants, and the 5 guest speaker panel. This was a great discussion. This was well needed. And yeah, so before we end, I just want to say, follow the YouTube, the Cornerstone Talk podcast. This podcast will be up between September 2nd and September 3rd. And that's it.
And follow
thank you guys.
And follow Change4NYC on Instagram. Yes.
Follow Change4NYC on Instagram. I'll be posting that in the YouTube link bio. So yeah.
Also, I wanted to add that our wonderful, beautiful PBL participants have not only created a social media platform for everyone to share their talents, and to share knowledge. And they've also helped to curate the questions and put together this podcast episode, but they've also gone a step farther and created a resource guide that will also be coming out
tomorrow,
September 2nd or tomorrow. That'll also be coming out. That'll share resources that help guide people to the things that they need, to the resources they need, specifically around the topics that we discussed today. And so I'm so extremely proud to have been able to share this space with all of you. And my heart is so full, and I thank you all so much for this incredible moment. And before I start to cry like a baby, I'm gonna say goodnight, and I just wish you all love and light. And
good night. Thank you for having me.
Great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and one thing I want to encourage y'all to do, if there was a particular topic that you are not well versed on, I encourage you and strongly encourage you to, get in your research bag and start looking at things. If, for example, we talked about, trans identities. If you have questions, if you are not familiar, ask me, ask anyone on the panel, do your research. It is important in this fight that we remain informed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great night.
You too.
You too.
Likewise.
Great job.
Bye.